All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kirsten Miller. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this webinar on social and emotional learning, school climate, and student voice, understanding the intersections to improve student outcomes. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar for you today, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Sammy Holquist, who's a researcher here at REL Pacific, and Ms. Lindsay Bao from Hawaii P20 Partnerships for Education. Sammy and Lindsay will be your primary presenters today. And we're also joined by my colleague, Betsy Calloway, who is serving as our technical presenter. Or technical facilitator, excuse me. So if you're having any trouble with your audio or any other technical issues, please do feel free to send Betsy a note in the chat box and we will do our best to get you squared away. Just a couple of little housekeeping issues to start. If you haven't attended a webinar using Zoom before, or if you're not familiar with the platform, it's a little different than some of the other webinar platforms that you might be familiar with. We have fewer restrictions on participant access, and that means that it's actually a little easier for us to run into some technical difficulties when people are clicking around on the commands. So we're going to ask you to limit yourself to using the chat box feature for now, but we do encourage you to use that feature throughout the webinar to ask questions or make observations. We will pause as appropriate as we have time to take questions, and we do have time at the end of the webinar for a more robust question and answer session. Before I hand this over to Sammy and Lindsay, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about REL Pacific and our work, in case you're not familiar with us yet. We are one of 10 regional educational laboratories, commonly known as RELs, that are funded by the Institute of Education Sciences. So on this slide, you can see all 10 of those regions. At REL Pacific, we serve educators in the state of Hawaii, 3 U.S. territories, including American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and then 3 independent nations in free association with the United States. So those are the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, which include Koshrai, Pohnpei, Chuuk, and Yap, and the Republic of Palau. So as you can see from this map, the REL Pacific region is really quite geographically vast. It spans an area that's greater than the entirety of the continental United States. And within these jurisdictions, we work with a number of research practice partnerships, and those focus on several distinct priority areas, which you can see on this graphic below. College and career readiness and success focuses on aligning system expectations for K-12 graduates with entry into college and the workforce. Professional learning is all about collaborating with teachers and system leaders to create a professional learning environment, not only in which teacher development works and improves practice, but in which it's welcomed. And so that's kind of the difference between having teacher buy-in or having teacher ownership. Language and literacy is about developing the language skills and literacy goals in multilingual contexts, and primarily that work is now in the lower grades. And then social and emotional learning, which is the priority area we're focusing on today, is about how we can use social and emotional competencies and supports to improve student outcomes. SEL also has implications for adults and educator well-being. I think we may touch briefly on that today, but that's probably a topic for another webinar. And then data use and readiness is about increasing institutional data use to improve system and student outcomes. And you can also kind of see how all of these priority areas interact. For example, the social and emotional priority area really can impact college and career readiness and success. So here are today's objectives, and we have a fair amount of ground to cover. So first, we're going to provide an overview of social and emotional learning, school climate, and student voice as strategies for promoting student success. And we're going to learn about the intersections between those 3 strategies and how you can use them in conjunction, and examine promising practices for implementing those strategies. And then Lindsay will talk to us about how stakeholders in Hawaii are supporting the use of social and emotional learning, school climate, and student voice in schools and districts. So why are we focusing on social and emotional learning, school climate, and student voice in the Pacific? So part of the reason is that within the laboratory program, the Pacific region is pretty unique, and that's not only geographically, but also culturally and contextually. And so SEL, school climate, and student voice really provide unique opportunities to address the needs in the region. You'll see that each of these bullets are also adaptable to your own context if you're not joining us from within the Pacific region. The desire to foster learning environments, for example, that better meet the needs of students in the community to support student academic development and well-being. I'm concerned about students' mental health, rates of depression and bullying. That's a perennial issue, certainly across the mainland US as well in the Pacific region. And then trauma and uncertainty. And in the Pacific region, that often results from typhoons, rising waters, and climate change, among other reasons. One example is in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, which is one of the jurisdictions that we serve. And it's among the lowest lying island nations in the world. They've declared a national emergency over climate change because rising sea levels are expected to actually make the islands uninhabitable by roughly 2050, which within the historical timeline is quite short. Certainly within our students' lifetimes, they will definitely see that year. So that's one of the ways that the Pacific context varies just a little bit from certainly the mainland context. So now I would like to introduce our presenters today. Dr. Samantha Holquist, we call her Sammy, is a researcher here at REL Pacific, and she provides training, coaching, and research support for projects under the REL Pacific contract, insights into how education researchers and practitioners can foster adult-youth partnership practices to support student academic and social and emotional outcomes. Sammy came to us with quite a bit of experience in the field. She has provided technical assistance to schools, districts, and state agencies that are striving to incorporate student and community voices into decision-making. She's served as the Chief Operating Officer of Oregon Student Voice and has supported research projects in this area as well. And we'd also like to welcome Ms. Lindsay Bao from the Hawaii P20 Partnerships for Education. She's a counseling program manager and provides leadership to middle school, high school, and college teams to develop a college and career guidance program. So in that capacity, she develops and offers professional development and technical assistance activities, hosts meetings among college and career guidance program grantees and external consultants, and also works collaboratively with the Hawaii Department of Education specialists to design and generate support for public schools to implement college and career guidance programs. So I'd like to welcome both Sammy and Lindsay to the webinar today, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to just take a moment to stop sharing my screen so that Sammy can start sharing hers and take over the slides.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you for the lovely introduction. Can you see my slides okay?
Yep, we can see them.
Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I will be talking about an overview of social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice. And Lindsay will talk about it in the Hawaii context of how it is being done by P20. And so just to start out, what led to the focus of states and districts and schools beginning to look at SEL, school climate, and student voice for their students? So in education, there's been a growing belief that student environments should support the development of the whole child, and that students need more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic to succeed in the world after graduating from high school or college. There's also been an increased focus on addressing student outcome disparities and inequitable disciplinary policies. And SEL, school climate, and student voice have been one way that districts and schools have looked at this. Additionally, there's been concerns about bullying and ineffective anti-bullying policies. Over the years, we've seen a rise in social media use and electronic bullying, and so schools are really trying to figure out how do we support our students in developing the skills and the relationships to better communicate with one another and to maybe not engage in those bullying activities. And then finally, we have the desire to better prepare students for college and or career. So all of these kind of fit together well into the helping students feel more prepared for engaging in the workforce or engaging in their community, whatever they are striving to do after they graduate from high school. and or college. And so each one of these strategies has been seen as a useful tool for helping students be prepared for that, and I'll go over that today. So these strategies are found in K-12 policies and practices across the United States and the Pacific region. So the Every Student Succeed Act, or ESSA, has a strong focus on other factors besides academic performance to support the whole child. There's a lot of flexibility in definitions for achievement within ESSA, and that allows for social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice to really thrive. We know that those three strategies aren't the only strategies that support the whole child, but those are just the ones that we're going to talk about today. Additionally, almost every state uses surveys to capture student experiences and thoughts on their school environment, which can be used as a measure of school climate. And so we see states striving to understand how students are feeling in their environment in order to make the environment more welcoming for them and to help students become more engaged. Additionally, all 50 states have SEL-related standards for preschool, and 14 states have actually developed K-12 standards for SEL. And we know that a lot of states are currently engaging in practices to help develop these standards and to help schools implement SEL practices in their school, in their classrooms. And Lindsay will talk a little bit about that today, about how P20 is helping that. And then finally, classrooms and districts and states are increasingly including students in decision making. And so that's where student voice is really coming into states and districts and schools. Students are actually being asked about how they want to be, how they want to learn or what they would like to learn, and policies that maybe will help them learn. And this is where student voice really plays a strong role in connecting social emotional learning and school climate. So that's kind of the background of the policies before we get into the actual what does social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice mean. So a quick overview of social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice. Social emotional learning for today, we're defining it as the skills that support students' personal and academic well-being. School climate is the cultural norms, goals, values, and practices that support students and adults in feeling safe, respected, and engaged in the environment. And student voice is the ways in which students participate in education decision-making. And so there's lots of different definitions out there for these topics. This is how we're going to talk about them today. Research suggests that using SEL, school climate, and student voice strategies in schools separately or in conjunction supports improving student academic achievement, social and emotional well-being, and mental health outcomes. And so we'll see that weaved into every aspect today when we're talking about social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice separately and together. So I just wanted to bring that up right away so that we can kind of look at how they're weaving together. And so first I want to talk about social emotional learning and dive deeper into this strategy. So social emotional learning is a process in which students and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. The graphic we have displayed here is CASTLE's framework for social emotional learning, where we see their 5 competencies of self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. But there are many other frameworks out there for social emotional learning that include competencies that we would want to teach students. And so when we talk about those competencies are really the knowledge, attitudes, and skills that we want them to acquire in order to achieve these 5 goals. So what does social emotional learning look like in practice? It looks like students and when social emotional learning is happening in a district or school, students and teachers are better able to manage their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and relationships. And that enables students and teachers to build better relationships with one another. Teachers are more engaged in the environment, and students are more engaged in the learning environment. Social emotional learning is often incorporated through explicit instruction, academic integration, promoting a positive learning environment, and feedback from parents and families. And I'll dive into those four practices on the next slide. But we really talk about, when we do social emotional learning, we talk about these four practices as the baseline for how you might want to think about integrating social emotional learning in your school. And then finally, social emotional learning occurs across schools, classrooms, schools, and system practices. And so we see social emotional learning in classrooms. We then see it across the school and across the system. In the classroom, it might look like explicit instruction. In the school, it might look like how they're helping their school climate. And across systems, it might look like standards for social emotional learning that are then implemented by schools and taught by teachers. And so when we're talking about implementing social emotional learning, like I said in the previous slide, there are four effective SEL implementation practices that we think about. And so the first one is explicit instruction, where we use lessons focused on teaching SEL to students. And so with explicit instruction, we really have teachers teaching lessons on SEL competencies to students. So those are things like self-management or self-awareness, lessons that teach those competencies to students. For academic integration, we incorporate SEL into the academic content. And so SEL doesn't have to be a separate lesson. It can be incorporated into the reading lessons that you're already doing or the math lessons that you're doing. And so we don't necessarily have to separate social emotional learning lessons from our academic lessons. We also have school climate, where we want to foster a positive school environment to promote SEL. We know, and I'm going to talk a little bit more school climate next, but we know that SEL, students really thrive in practicing their SEL when they have a school climate that enables them to use their social emotional learning skills. And then finally, we have family and the community. It's often important to communicate SEL goals beyond the school walls, because we know that student learning doesn't stop at the school walls. We know they go home and they learn from their families, and they go to community organizations after school and learn from there. So as much as possible, we love to align social emotional learning goals both in the school and outside of the school, so that students continue their learning throughout the entirety of their childhood. And then finally, SEL goals are more likely to be achieved when approaches are used across settings. And so that's when we talk about making sure that you have classroom social emotional learning, school social emotional learning, and system social emotional learning, so that students, as they're continuing their time through their educational career, they're gaining skills that are similar, and they're building upon those skills as they travel from kindergarten to 12th grade. And some concrete examples of social emotional learning would be teaching lessons on effective listening. So that would be an explicit instruction, or providing vocabulary words for students to understand their feelings, which would be an example of academic integration. So for social emotional learning, when we think about the outcomes of social emotional learning, we think about students and teachers that are self-aware, engage in effective self-management strategies, and can build and maintain positive relationships. We know that when students engage in social emotional learning practices, they grow individually and collectively along measures of academic success and social emotional well-being. When they feel more engaged in the environment, or they feel like they have positive relationships with teachers, they're better able to engage in the academic learning material, and they have a better sense of self about their own well-being and how they are feeling. And so that's a little bit about social emotional learning. And so I want to move into school climate now, which is one of the components of the social emotional learning. But school climate is also a piece of itself. And so school climate consists of the culture, norms, goals, values, and practices that help students and adults feel safe, respected, and engaged on campus. It was once thought that a positive school climate was the foundation for implementing social emotional learning and student voice strategies, but recent research suggests that they are mutually beneficial. And so originally we thought that you couldn't do social emotional learning or student voice without having a school climate that really supported these. But more recent research finds that actually doing them all three together can really help students, can really benefit one another and create a rich environment for supporting student learning and helping students feel engaged in their school. And so what does school climate look like? It looks like teachers and students that feel physically and emotionally safe and engaged in their schools. It's often incorporated through the development of policies, procedures, and norms to support a positive learning environment, and then occurs across classroom and school-wide practices. And so these policies are often things that we think about, like dress code or anti-bullying policies, or how teachers and students might think about relating to one another through relationship building. It could also be norms for how teachers and students communicate, or how administrators communicate with teachers and students. It just looks a little bit different depending on your context and your student population. Some promising practices for implementation of school climate is oftentimes we see that school climate, school climate is most beneficial when it's implemented through using student voice, which is supporting students in being co-leaders and co-learners in developing these norms and practices for what their school climate should maybe look like. And so that can sometimes look like having a student leadership team or a student advisory council that's working with administrators to think about how do they build a positive school climate in their school. We also know that school climate depends on social emotional learning, and that students and adults need to build their social emotional learning skills to help promote a positive school climate. And so when adults and students have social emotional learning skills to build positive relationships, to effectively manage conflicts, it leads to a more positive school climate. And then there's also partnerships where there needs to be a space for multiple stakeholders to participate in decisions. And so community voice is often important when we're talking about school climate, because communities know their student population as well and might have some helpful feedback on where we want to maybe focus policies, or maybe what are the things that the students are struggling with within the school, or what are the things that teachers maybe need support with. And then finally, we have inclusion and equity, and ensuring that all adults and students feel supported and safe in the school environment. If not all adults feel supported and safe, then the school climate isn't going to be a place where everyone feels like they can engage, or that this school is somewhere where they feel like they belong. And so we really like to use these 4 domains to think about implementing school climate so that we can see how the school can best serve everybody and everyone can feel engaged and safe and supported. So when we look at school climate, we often use a tool to assess the school climate is essential for tracking success. And so we often will maybe assess what the school climate is at the beginning of the year and the end of the year to think about how are we improving in school climate when we implement new policies or practices or norms. And so some examples of school climate implementation include building partnerships between schools and communities to think about how do we build a positive school climate, and then creating school policies to support student safety, such as anti-bullying policies. When school climate is positive, we see that students and teachers feel safe, respected, engaged, and supported in the school. We also see that students grow individually and collectively along measures of academic success and social emotional well-being, because students feel like they can be more engaged and have a stronger sense of belonging in the school. And then finally, we have student voice. So student voice represents the ways in which all students have opportunities to participate in and influence the education decisions that will shape their lives and the lives of their peers. The term student voice has often been used interchangeably with student participation, student engagement, youth adult partnership, and others. But when we talk about student voice, we often try to talk about it as a separate category from social emotional learning and school climate, because it does involve students having the opportunities to participate in and influence education decisions. And it might not just be one-off consultation where you ask students how they're feeling their school climate, or you ask students how they're doing along social emotional learning competencies. We often like to see student voice being where students participate in and influence the education decisions. And so what does it look like? It can look like indirect or direct student participation in education decision making. Indirect would look like maybe the school does a survey and the students are able to express their feelings and experiences in that survey. The survey goes back to adults, and the adults then give feedback to students on how they're going to make changes based off of the survey results. And so in that example, students aren't directly participating in decision making, but they are indirectly by responding to the survey and then hearing the feedback from adults about that survey. And so feedback is really important in student voice if it is indirect participation. For direct participation, that really looks like students co-leading or co-designing with educators and adults. So student voice is often incorporated through feedback forms, surveys, focus groups, student representation, student leadership, and other avenues. There's many different ways that you can do student voice in your school and in your district and your state. It just depends on what's right for your context and what's right for your adults at that time and for your students. And so it occurs across classroom, school, and system practices. So promising practices for implementation of student voice. We often separate these along 4 domains as well. There are other domains for student voice, school climate, and social emotional learning. These are just the big 4 that that we think about when we're wanting to make sure that student voice is implemented effectively to reach the best outcome. So there's often youth development where you need to build students' capacity to participate in decisions. We often don't give students a chance to participate in decisions before when they're in their education, and so this might be a new concept for them. We find that students as young as 9 can begin to separate themselves from adults, and so around 9 is when we can start seeing students as co-leaders and co-decision makers. And before 9, we often use practices like feedbacks and surveys. We also think it's also really important to have an adult ally to help promote student voice practices across the school, classroom, or system. There often needs to be at least one adult to support students in decision making. We like to see more, but if there's at least one, then students are going to be able to better participate because they have an adult advocate. When students are just beginning to participate in decision making, it can often be easy it can often, since it's not a continuous practice, it can often be important to have an adult there supporting students. And as student voice becomes more and more of a continuous practice, it'll become more incorporated into the school system or state system. And therefore it'll be easier to turn to turn to students for decisions. But when in the very beginning, it's often important to have at least one to help students participate in those decisions and to advocate for their voices. We also need relationships. Relationships are really important for student to student and student adult. When student voice is first starting in a school or system or classroom, it's often an uncomfortable experience for students because they are shifting into a role that they're not traditionally in the school environment. And so those student to student relationships are often really important for students to rely on one another in co-leading decisions. And also those student-adult relationships are really important because if students don't feel like their voice is being heard or that they have influence, then they're going to disengage from the process. And then equity and inclusion is essential to student voice because all students need to feel that their voice is heard and that they have an opportunity to share their voice and that they feel safe in sharing their voice. And so we often see that there can be student leadership groups where some students are excluded from sharing their voice and we only hear the student leadership voice. And so, or we only hear the voice of subsets of students. And so when we think about inclusion, equity, and student voice, we like to think about offering multiple opportunities for students to share their voice and multiple venues for students to share their voice because students might not all feel comfortable talking in front of a school board, but they might feel more comfortable maybe responding to a survey or talking to their peers in a group and then presenting to a school board. And so it really just depends on your school and your context and what you think about your students and what they would want to engage in. I always recommend when you're designing student voice practices to co-design them with students because they'll have a better idea of what they feel comfortable with. And so we want to ensure that implementation is inclusive of student voice and not tokenization of student voice. And so when we think about inclusive of student voice, we think about that students' voices are actually influencing decisions and that they're being used to make decisions. And tokenization is really when we see that student voice is being shared and leaders are maybe using that voice in a different way than the students had meant to share or meant to have it used. And so it might be an example where a leader wants feedback on a policy, but they only want one type of feedback on a policy, and that's positive feedback. And so maybe they will only look at the positive feedbacks of that policy and not maybe the other feedback that students have on that policy. And so examples of student voice implementation include administration of a survey of student experiences, where administrators maybe look at that survey alongside students to see what are students' experiences and how are they going to develop policies to maybe address some concerns that students have in their education system environment. And then another example of student voice implementation is creating a student advisory group to support education leaders in making decisions. And then a final classroom example is to collaborate with students to co-create classroom lessons. And so we really see that each one of these is a great example of how to implement student voice in your schools. And you can use these to promote school climate or social emotional learning. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. So what are the outcomes of student voice? We see that when students have a voice in their school, they feel empowered to advocate for their needs and the needs of their peers. This advocacy results in classroom and schools and systems that better serve student-identified needs, as well as help students grow individually and collectively along measures of academic success and social emotional well-being. When students feel like they have influence in their school environment, they feel more engaged in their school environment and they feel more connected to the lessons that they're learning. And so how do these three work together? What is their interaction? When we see combined implementation of social emotional learning, school climate, and student voice, we see a tri-directional relationship. We see that social emotional learning promotes the development of students' social emotional competencies. We see that school climate promotes a positive, safe, and engaging environment, which allows students and adults to develop and use their social emotional competencies. And we see that student voice empowers students to use learned social emotional competencies to participate in education decision-making and contribute to creating a positive school climate or school environment. And so we see these three things as really important to be working together to create a school system that has really positive outcomes for their students. So when we look at social emotional learning, student voice, and school climate happening together, we see that school systems have more supportive relationships between students, teachers, and administrators. Students develop better relationships with educators within their setting, and they're more likely to turn to those educators when they're encountering a challenge or when they have something positive happen in their life. We also see increased engagement among students in their learning and school environment. Like I said, when students feel like they have influence in their school environment and they've been able to contribute to creating a positive school climate, when they've been able to use those social emotional learning competencies, they're more engaged in their learning. We also see that classrooms and schools are more adaptive and to meeting the needs of students. When students are able to express their voice and they feel safe to express their voice and they have the skills to express their voice, then classrooms can respond to those by adapting to those needs. And so students can share what's working and what's not working, and classrooms can respond to that. We also see that there's teachers and administrators are more culturally responsive to working with students and families and communities. They're more likely to respond to their students' needs and be more aware of what's happening in their community. And then finally, as I said before, all three of these lead to growth along measures of academic success and social emotional well-being. So each one of these really contributes to helping students feel better prepared in their learning and feeling safer in their learning environment and more academically well-being. Sorry. And so now Lindsay's going to talk to us about what does this look like in her setting as a leader at Hawaii P20. Leader in this work.
Hi everyone, I want to thank Sammy and the McREL team for inviting me here. We're really embarking on some exciting work that involves social emotional learning, mostly social emotional learning, but definitely tapping into school climate and student voice strategies. Just some background information about myself. I have more than 10 years of experience as a counselor and an advisor in the secondary and post-secondary level. Mainly working with disadvantaged populations and minorities. Here in Hawaii, it's our indigenous populations, which is Native Hawaiians. So yeah, I've been lucky to be able to work at Hawaii P20 for the last 5 years at a very program level, offering support for our educational partners. So just a few key takeaways from some of the information I'll be sharing today. If you don't know who we are, I'll give you a quick overview of what we do as an organization. I'll definitely explain how and why we support our educators and provide you a landscape of existing goals and initiatives that we promote. And I'll spend most of the time to give you an overview on how we incorporate SEL, school climate and student voice within a pathways approach, which is basically a systemic approach within our state system. And I'll dive into some concrete projects that we have been piloting to support student outcomes and some next steps that we're taking to expand and improve. So Hawaii P20 Partnerships for Education. A lot of states have different P20 councils. We're very similar in the way that we work. Our main mission is really to strengthen the educational pipeline, starting from early education through the workforce. And we do this in big ways. So our role is basically we're conveners. So we see gaps in the educational pipeline, we see challenges. And so we're able to actually convene these large stakeholders to really facilitate some change. We also have the wonderful privilege to be able to innovate some projects and best practices through various funding sources and be able to incubate those programs within our public education system and to scale the successes. We're also very lucky to have and hold our longitudinal state system. So this is a partnership between the University of Hawaii Department of Education, DLIR, as well as Department of Health. So we're gonna be able to actually track students that enter our pipeline and track them into the workforce. And again, we take that data to inform our best practices and our approaches. And again, lastly, is to be able to advocate for policy change, which is ideally our overall goal for our state of Hawaii. I put up 55 by 25, you'll see on the right side. Basically, our P20 Council saw a need to really encourage post-secondary enrollment for careers and economic stability in our state of Hawaii. And so our goal since 2008 was to really have 55% of adults to earn a college degree or some type of credential by the year of 2025. Currently, we're about 47%, but interesting enough, we're actually going to start embarking on tracking students that might have gained some type of credential, will it be a certificate or years of training, and hopefully that will increase our numbers a bit. So here's again, another way to explain some of our specific projects that we do. We have 4 initiatives here. I won't read through all of it, but basically how it works is a lot of what I'll be sharing today is within the goal 2, 3, and 4. You'll see bullet points. So those are actually large projects in which our office is facilitating as of this year between our K-12 partners and post-secondary partners. So I definitely wanted to start a little bit. I think the best takeaway that I'll be spending my time on is really to explain an approach on how we decided to simplify messaging out the purpose and importance of embedding SEL, school climate, and student voice within any initiatives within your school. Here at P20, because we're able to work with a variety of partners, we've come across many challenges. I mean, you yourself can probably think from preschool all the way to past college. You can think of the top challenges that schools deal with. But one of the common challenges that we hear of is students are just not ready for the real world. I think that's just in general, and I'm sure you're hearing it more. You know, we hear about these millennials not being able to hold a job. I laugh because I am technically a millennial, but I don't view myself in that way. But yeah, so we're just seeing, especially here in Hawaii, we are seeing a need to really better prepare our students for a brighter future and a more sustainable and successful future. And so really the question becomes, is our Hawaii students college, career, and community ready? And I'll explain a little bit on how we're defining that. But basically what I'll be sharing is an approach on how we took this and how we're implementing change and facilitating change. So how we start to approach this idea, obviously we have to do some background research on our main stakeholders. So obviously our largest is our K-12 Department of Education, our public school system. And we start from the top. We want to know what teachers understand. We want to know what administrators understand and how they approach this big challenge of students not being fully prepared once they leave their educational pipeline. So we start from policy, actually. So every state has a very similar policy. Here in Hawaii, it's right in front of you right now, for all public high school graduates. Basically, you see the 4 bullet points of what they need to achieve. First one, realize their individual goals and aspirations. 2, possess the attitudes, knowledge, and skills necessary to contribute positively and compete in a global society. Exercise the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. And lastly, pursue post-secondary education or career. I'll just stop there for a second. When I first saw this, I didn't know much about policy before I entered P20. I saw this and I got some anxiety. I was stressing out a bit because I'm like, how many of these teachers do you know that understand this policy? How many administrators can you approach to really ask, so how are you doing this in your school? How are you making sure that every single one of your students that graduates has these 4 components? And I'll tell you, a lot of them have a lot of weight on their shoulders, because myself, I would not be able to even define the steps to achieve these goals. And I think the approach that we've taken is a way to simplify things in a very common language, as well as a very systemic approach. Luckily, stars are aligning. We do have these big policies, but we also have an opportunity to make change, to really, again, incorporate SEL, school climate, and student voice. And we're at the sunset of our old strategic plan and actually finalizing, as of this year, I think around winter 2020, our new first ever 10-year strategic plan. We've never had that long of a strategic plan in Hawaii, but we are calling it a promise plan. Our superintendent has identified 5 themes that you'll see here. We have Hawaii, equity, school design, empowerment, and innovation. If you see the bolded orange wording, it's kind of like the more focused areas of what that entire theme is about. And we ourselves at P20 really focus on school design, because we feel that this is the greatest way to really create large change and quick change is within a school design structure. Now, when we look at our second largest stakeholder group, this is obviously our University of Hawaii system. Sorry, I didn't mention before, but the unique thing about Hawaii is that we're actually one educational system, K-12 actually, as well as post-secondary. And we're actually the only one in the nation that actually serves as one district. We are split into 5 different complex areas. We have 8 islands here. So you can imagine it's quite an interesting, unique situation. The University of Hawaii, again, one system. We have 3 university campuses, so 4-year institutions, as well as 7 community colleges, and around 3 to 5 community learning centers, which are usually in the rural communities within our islands. And so that is basically, we achieve to work as a better one system structure. So again, when we talk about the university system and how they're dealing with our kids' college and career and community readiness, what they've noticed is they're having a hard time with enrollment numbers. We're seeing a decrease with graduation rates in Hawaii, and we're also seeing low retention rates. And so we definitely want to approach this and address this problem. And again, it comes back to, is it because the students don't have the skills? Is it because the students don't know where to seek services to just continue their education? In the last 3 years, there was a big group that came together from all campuses and built a student success network. And they built this framework. And so basically what you see is a continuum. When you assume a student steps, the first year they step on campus, you know, you'll see from the left is where they'll start gaining their purpose, so connection, and making sure that they're already on the right path. You'll see, hopefully by within the first 2 years, they'll get to progress and learning, where advising happens, and making sure that they have been informed of all their options and explore careers, and making sure they're on track with math and English. And then again, hopefully we do encourage 4-year degrees that they would eventually learn how to transfer to 4-year institutions, or gain more certificate or some type of professional training to really just be successful in their career. And so the yellow box to your right is really the ultimate goal of making sure that they have the equipped learning, be given the equity of services to succeed in their academics, and have economic mobility. Here in Hawaii, it's extremely expensive to live, if you don't know. So we know it's extremely important for them to earn a high demand, high living wage to be able to be successful here, and obviously be actually quite competitive within the labor market. ISS on the bottom, just sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, but ISS stands for Integrated Student Support Services. So there's actually a really big subgroup within ISS that is trying to build holistic academic career and transfer support. And it's quite interesting because within this group, I'm very happy to say that there's a very big mix of leadership. You have faculty, you have students in here to really share out. If this is the ultimate continuum, how do you get there by serving your students holistically? And social emotional learning actually comes up quite a bit in faculty. They say, you know, students are not prepared to take my class as a freshman. And we've had a lot of faculty identify those skills. We are having conversations, and so there's a lot of really exciting work that we're embarking on, and I'll share a little bit more on specific projects that engage in this. So I just shared a little bit about some framework from the post-secondary institutions, as well as our DOE big policies. So you can only imagine, you know, how do you reach all these goals? We're so overwhelmed. You have teachers overwhelmed, and really the ultimate goal when it comes down to it, when you talk to a principal, we talk very much with principals and administrators at the complex level to say, you know, my biggest thing is we just want to make sure our kids graduate, or we want to make sure that our kids are transitioning on time from elementary to middle and middle to high. Like, that's our biggest goals, and we want to make sure they pass their placement tests, like ACT scores. We want to make sure that they're building that up. It's so academic rigorous, and that we really put SEL, we really put social and emotional learning to the side. We really don't talk about those needed support systems for those low income populations in our rural communities. And so we knew it. We knew that chaos is happening. Epi 20, you just accept it, and you just try to find ways to simplify it. And so that was what we were embarking on in the last 2 years. So for us as an organization, because we saw this, because we saw the messiness and the chaos of people not communicating with each other and misunderstanding kind of what the overall goals are within a school, within a complex, within the entire district, we had to gather all our stakeholders. So 2 years ago, I mean, these are our common partners, but we really needed to focus on what is our strategy that we're all going to agree upon. And so you'll see these are our main partners that we brought to the table to discuss about this challenge and how do we make sure our kids are fully prepared. And here's our answer. We did a lot of research, and of course Hawaii is the newest state. I mean, we're babies compared to other states, and we've seen a lot of success in this so-called pathways model. And so the concept of this looks quite robust, I understand, but if you just start from the orange box on the right and you just cover your hand over the arrow, the first thing really is all of our stakeholders identified 4 outcomes. 4 outcomes that really talks about making sure that after our students exit our educational pipeline, what do we want them to achieve and what is our system looking like? And obviously our biggest thing is we wanted students to be adaptable. We want adults to be adaptable to the changing workforce because we know it can change in 5 to 10 years. Especially in Hawaii, our job opportunities are extremely low compared to various different states, so we have to be accommodating to that. We definitely wanted increased number of skilled professionals that hold a degree and certificate because we know research shows for those that hold a degree, they are earning over a lifetime more than $1 million than those that don't have degrees. And again, we really want to build a collaborative system that increases active engagement in local and global community. And overall, we want to keep our local students here in Hawaii, and we're seeing a mass exodus of our local students leaving, mainly because of the expenses here. It's very expensive to live here, and so how do we message that out to keep our locals here, and how do we build a school system structure to address it? So when you look at the far left, you'll see 3 components. So we did a lot of our talking, we did a lot of research, and we saw high leverage points that occur in rigorous academics, college and career advising and counseling, work-based learning. And we figured, you know what, in P20, if we have funding and we have support structures, let's focus our areas here and make sure we incorporate a holistic centered service approach. And that includes SEL, school climate, and student voice. In the middle here, so basically what we're saying here in this diagram is that these 3 core components have to integrate together. It's not siloed. Traditionally, I think it's very easy to work in silos. You have your content teachers work separately from your counselors. You have your counselors not necessarily working with your advisory boards. And it gets messy. Duplication happens, and we're not building a more robust system for our students, which eventually will hurt them. We're focusing this approach in the last 2 years, starting from middle school. We do really hope to embark on the younger ages, so K through 5. But right now, because of the stakeholder and capacity at this point, we're really focusing on strengthening the middle school articulation to post-secondary. In the middle here, you'll see that we again promote scaffolding and high wage jobs, advanced skill jobs. So we're seeing credentials starting potentially in high school. We're seeing students taking early college courses. We're seeing students taking certificates in high school. And so how do you bring that to an AA degree? You know, how do you transfer a auto mechanics certificate that you've just earned to then transfer it to maybe an engineering degree or a path in an AA or a BA? And hopefully that, you know, by the time they exit our pipeline, that they are well equipped. And again, we'll definitely have time for questions. I'm sure there was a lot that I've missed here that didn't make any sense, but I'll be happy to answer all your questions after my slides. So here's a quick snapshot of the work that we're doing within Pathways, the islands that we're working with and districts, as well as certain projects, just so you kind of get a sense of who we are in Hawaii and where we're embedding ourselves. So now for the fun stuff. Let's talk about some current strategies and projects that we're currently doing within the regions that I just showed with you. Not every region is doing the exact similar stuff, but it's within range. We know that our communities are extremely different, so we try to meet them where they're at. I'll actually skip the first bullet point, the CCCR Expectations Guide, which stands for College, Career, and Community Readiness Expectations Guide. I'm going to do a deep dive in a little bit in a future slide, but basically the concept of this and how we incorporate social emotional learning is really a map for schools to really use to be able to plan and strategize how to implement SEL in their school. What we're currently doing right now, which we're excited about, is professional development for our public schools. We did a huge statewide survey in 2017 with teachers and counselors. And one of the questions we wanted to see is how many counselors are given professional development opportunities? Are they getting enough, and what does it look like? Sadly, what we notice is a lot of our counselors and advisors in the K-12 system are not given many. And I think a lot of the focus is on teacher development, which is great, but I think because we're seeing more need for student services, we're trying to get a sense of what we need to support our counselors with. And so our office really invested in working with the only institution that actually has an accredited counseling program. So they actually graduate majority of our counselors in our system, to offer online courses for professional development credits. And so PD3 is really the credit-bearing courses that counselors can take and teachers can take to be able to get a reclassification in their salary. So we've been investing in that in the last year, and we'll be continuing to do that. And we're currently customizing a social emotional learning course that spans from middle school to high school, and what that might look like when you crosswalk college and career readiness and activities. We also, we do a lot of technical assistance workshops. We've done a few social emotional learning ones because of the request of our rural communities. They're putting that as their top priority, and I'll actually share a little bit of an example of what we just did this past October. And again, one of the biggest things is creating resources and community network opportunities. When I talk about community network opportunities, we try to be intentional to actually offer time, whether it be during a technical assistant workshop or an all-day conference or two-day summit, where community organizations can come to meet with our educational partners. We're trying to definitely add that into our schedule more, because we see great work happening there. Social and emotional learning cannot be only done at a school level. It can't because of capacity wise. So we're seeing a good leverage point with our community organizations, because honestly, they have funding, they have support, they're eager to work with schools, but schools just don't know how to approach these organizations and businesses that have these resources. So we offer that through our technical assistance workshops. For school climate, I will tell you again, like, we're doing most of the work in social emotional learning, but how we understand school climate. We're not necessarily supporting students directly, but how we approach it is actually at the teacher level, educator level. When we know that if educators are supported in a positive environment, if we know that they're given flexibility and autonomy to be able to be the best employee at their organization, we know that that only trickles down to the work that they do within their peers, as well as the teacher, as well as the students that they work with. And so we're really investing on that to support our educators. And how we do that is actually through family and community engagement projects. We're focusing a lot of that in rural communities. An example is we have, because some schools have lack of resources, We know that community organizations have those resources. What we're seeing is if administrators are flexible to allow teachers to bring in, we'll just say, I don't know, employees to talk to their classes. If we have administrators allowing, you know, community organizations that have certificate programs or vote programs to be within the schools to work with the students, it really, really encourages teachers and relieves their load actually to do this kind of work. We ourselves encourage partnerships. I mean, that's obviously in our name. So we definitely want this not to be a hurdle for schools. So in every way that we can, when we work with partners, our educational partners specifically, and especially the DOE, because it's not normal for them to reach out to their communities. We basically work with administrators to say, you know, you need to craft out opportunities for your teachers and actually your counselors to be able to have time to do this. I just learned from one of the high schools recently that he totally restructured his bell schedule so he could offer his staff co-planning time, and not just co-planning time, but some time for them to collaborate actually with their community. So he was able to adjust his bell schedule so counselors and teachers can actually work together 2 to 3 times a week. And this was huge because now they have an opportunity to not communicate. This is an opportunity that they create an agenda specifically to make sure teachers share out what's happening, counselors share out about at-risk students and how to be addressed. So when they talk about creating an IEP plan, it's literally a teamwork between teachers, admins, and counselors. And so we see these great best practices and we're excited to see it. And again, school-wide and system-wide professional development is also what we're investing in. So things like externships, which is also the bullet point. But what we see is externships is a huge thing because teachers and counselors don't really get to step out during the school day to learn about how to bring real work into their curriculum. We have teachers that have been teaching the same things for more than 15 years. And so we need to be able to offer them opportunities to go see what careers are looking like. What are the skills that are needed to teach back into the classroom? And again, it's also just a positivity, allowing flexibility for teachers to be able to step away and to build their capacity and just for them to be refreshed. So we're investing in that as well. And lastly, regional convening. So similar to social emotional learning TAs, what we're doing right now is complex-wide and regional convenings where we're bringing the feeder middle schools with feeder high schools with a post-secondary feeder campus with work-based learning intermediaries, meaning we are identifying those employers wanting our Hawaii students to work for them. And so it's basically a ginormous advisory board. We're talking, we're planning to make sure we have strategies in place to support our students. And lastly, student voice. So obviously student focus groups are occurring mainly because, well, not only because it's like written into a grant that we have to do focus groups, but we know this is extremely important for feedback and we actually captured stories through this. So we have a ton of strategies with focus groups for middle school, high school to inform kind of programs actually, what was working for them, what was not working for them. We have very indirect parent-student surveys at critical points of transition. So we have, I believe, a 9th grade survey that we send out. And again, these are like these are large surveys. These are like statewide surveys that our data exchange partnership is kind of in lead of doing and collecting this information. We also collect student stories, which is huge. Actually, it's a very big thing in Hawaii right now for our superintendent. So she's fully in Instagram and giving autonomy to high schools and middle schools to track certain students to be able to do profile. Yeah, it's super amazing. I'm like super impressed. I'm like, oh wow, the high school should be doing this too. And lastly, I think the most easiest thing to do for us is embedding student voice through student panels. So we have so many opportunities to have summits, conferences. We throw these statewide, and we ourselves are trying to be intentional to bring student voice through panels or presentations and embed them, because sometimes we think of, oh my gosh, we're just so frantic on trying to figure out who our speaker sessions are that we really tend to forget about the students. And what we do is we invite them to participate, whether they present or just come and provide their feedback and see what should be structured differently, or offer them opportunities. Actually, it's exciting. We are tapping into some videography. There's academies, high schools have academies, so we're touching the arts and media. We're targeting those students to be able to come to use their skills. We would love your photography skills. We would love your videography. And of course, it's no cost to us, right? So it's great. It's a win-win for everything. So we definitely are leveraging some resources there, but obviously, encouraging these opportunities for our students and our schools, because the schools, when they hear that they have this opportunity, of course they're going to push these students to do it, because it's something that it's something tangible for them to experience outside of the school. So just a really quick snapshot again of what we just went over, but you probably were like, oh, this is so great, so many projects, initiatives. That's right. Good to hear. There's no way that I can actually do that within our role or within our school. So the question that always happens is, great, P20, you do this, but how do you build sustainability and how do you build capacity? And we're very much like, we get that a lot, and we're like, you know what, you're right. And the best way to do this is really to build resources. So I'm going to share, I mentioned that I was going to skip over the College and Career Community Readiness Expectations Guide, so I'm actually going to go over this right now. And this is one of the resources that we hope that would help build capacity and start conversations. So we're not the meeting planners. We're not the ones calling the folks to be part of this conversation to really address that big goal of students not being prepared. So this is revision 1042 of our framework. But we're calling this the College, Career, and Community Readiness Expectations Guide. We're actually, you guys are lucky, you're seeing a preview of what we're actually going to launch formally on the 24th at our upcoming summit. But so we knew when we talked about, when you go back to the BOE policy, right, those 4 components, if you ask a school how you get there, all they want to know is like, just tell me the steps. Has any other state done it? Has any other school done it? Like, just give it to me. And we're like, well, we don't really have the answer for you. But through our work, we realized, you know what, we need to build something. We need to build something for schools, because we're actually doing a lot of programming around these areas. And so we built student competencies, which in the DOE terms is kind of like standards. That hit college readiness, career readiness, and community readiness. And we know that all of these 3 things have to happen. And so these are the broad goals that need to occur that we say for students to be college, career, and community. These are the expectations. I want to focus a little bit on the community readiness part, because that's where actually how we're messaging out SEL is embedded, student voice and student climate. So here in Hawaii, we actually, in 2017, I feel like everything happened in 2017, maybe 2016, we were going to revise the GLOs for DOE. And within the GLOs, I'm sorry if I just clarify, is the general learning outcomes for all of DOE K through 12. And so they're in the process of changing this policy. And within this conversation of happening, because we're so culturally based in Hawaii, they decided to create actually a framework that speaks very highly about Hawaii culture. And so so basically in 2017, they passed a framework which we call Naho'opena A'o. For short, we call it the HA framework. And so the HA framework has been around. Schools are still very much engaged in it, and that's where you'll see the green. You'll see HA green. I know it's a little bit small, but we did basically a crosswalk, because we know that community readiness is extremely important, but we didn't want to make things equal. HA was already developed and had competencies to it and indicators to say these are the qualities, behaviors, and skills that students need to have in order to be successful in Hawaii in a cultural aspect. And of course, we know the CASEL national framework. We know that this was something that DOE adopted already. And so we just crosswalked CASEL, HAW, and our community readiness standards, which you'll see on the top in the purple. And we know that all of these three are not equal, but we know that they work together and they have to work together. And when I presented this through feedback sessions, the first thing that within the college competencies, career readiness, the first thing that principals really loved was the community part, because they themselves could not understand how to incorporate all of this work, all of this more, I guess, unclear HAW and CASEL SEL framework into the overall push for college and career readiness. So again, this is the overall umbrella strategies and competencies that we're messaging out, and with this comes benchmarks. So a lot of states, again, have very similar benchmarks, but I think we're a little bit different in the sense we're going to try to embark on doing community benchmarks as well. That's coming hopefully by the end of this year. We're not quite there yet, but we definitely have crafted out college and career. So what we're saying is by the end of each grade level, and again, we're starting from middle school and hoping to stretch this out late or earlier from K through 5, is that we hope that students will achieve each one of these within a college aspect and a career aspect. And on the bottom, we have activity examples that we suggest to schools, which really will help schools to meet these benchmarks. We are developing templates, working templates actually, for schools to actually adjust these benchmarks. We know that this is suggested. Every school is so different. Every complex is so different. So we acknowledge that, and we know that there'll be changes, and we're going to offer them that opportunity to do that through a template. So after we actually vetted this through various feedback sessions, we wanted to test it out and see if we wanted to build out the community piece, what would that look like? And so we actually did this through a Kauai Island summit, where all of their schools, K through 12, came. It's a smaller island with 3 high schools, so we were able to do it. But it was an exciting opportunity where we can test out our framework, the college and career benchmarks, to really dive into it in terms of what's already happening in your schools and how do you work with what you have and just embed it into a framework so people understand your work. And then we had an opportunity to action plan for the community aspects of it using the student competencies. So the purpose of the summit that we did, obviously, it actually came down from administration, the complex level, the complex area superintendent. He really pushed for incorporating social emotional learning in his school, and again, to address very similar issues, you know, trauma, we're talking about bullying, we're talking about low attendance rates, all of that. He knew SEL was important, and he wanted everyone to be on the same page and understanding of it. So how would you do that? You bring everyone together so you can talk to each other and learn from the same people. So we brought in a national speaker. She was amazing. She actually brought in the science behind why learning is so important and how experiences change your mindset. Her name is Dr. Yang, and so she's a researcher out of I believe Stanford. And she came and she blew everyone away, and everyone was on board and like, yes, we know that social emotional learning is a huge strategy and what we need to embed in our school systems. And Kauai saw that, and they all agreed to it. So she spoke. We had local practitioners, so we had actual people who were implementing already SEL work, and they were able to share within their schools and actually to all other feeder schools, because you have great stuff happening at the elementary, but the elementary is not talking to the middle school and sharing this out. The middle school doesn't know what's happening at the elementary. There's not conversation happening. And it's not just Kauai, that's just statewide. Like, we're not talking to each other at the best way that we could. And again, we actually, like I said, we're very intentional in trying to bring community organizations together. So we actually brought large stakeholders, their local stakeholders that actually want to support this strategy of social emotional learning. So there was 150 members that work with at-risk youth. and they came, and these were workforce folks, these were nonprofits, these were philanthropists that all came to message out what they could offer their schools within their district, within their regions, excuse me. And we crafted out mapping, exercising, and action planning opportunities. So the best value of this is taking inventory of what's already occurring, because the last thing you want to do is reinvent the wheel. So all you gotta do is just strategize of what's already occurring in your school, and we're able to action plan and identify priority areas. And so that's what we're doing the last hour and a half through the summit. And so after the summit, we basically wanted to see if we can scale it. So that's what we're actually planning to do as a next step, hopefully to do in the next year or two, because excitingly enough, I think going back to what Sammy was saying, within the 50 states, I think there were 14 that has SEL standards, and Hawaii is going to be another one within the next year. So the Department of Education has agreed and wants social emotional learning K-12 standards. So we are going to support that as an organization for our department, and hopefully find a way to crosswalk it with existing work that we're doing to promote college and career and community readiness. So yeah, just right here for next steps as us as an organization, again, is just to continue to finalize our expectations guide, which is our benchmarks, as well as finalizing our competencies, and offer more resources within that. So it's working templates that schools can take with them, so they can action plan, have conversations with community partners and their just general feeder schools and their partners. We have a great opportunity to have someone who specializes in incorporating SEL into districts, and so she's actually coming very shortly in the next week and a half to share how we can do that. And so, and part of this is actually being part of a state collaborative to do this kind of work and track it. And lastly, of course, is definitely expanding and supporting our educators with PD, because that's the first thing that you could do, is offer more education on that area to be able to support SEL school climate and student voice. So that's it. I'm sorry I talked a little bit too much, but definitely please send any questions my way. And if you're ever in Hawaii, please, feel free to connect. We'd love to share with you some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Sammy, for all of that great information. We would like to open it up to questions for everybody now. You can go ahead and put any of your questions in that chat box. And while you are doing that, I'm going to push out our stakeholder feedback survey. It's just a short survey that we ask you to take so that we can get a sense of what worked for you today, what you might like to see done differently next time, and then also what kinds of webinars you might like to see from us in the future. So I'm pushing that link out right now to you. And then if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. We'll wait for a couple of minutes here and see if those come in. But again, thank you so much, Lindsay and Sammy. That was really extremely interesting. And Lindsay, to hear how Hawaii P20 has been implementing some of these strategies has been extremely fascinating. Yes, there will be a recording of today's webinar posted. That was one question that came through. We will need to go ahead and get that closed caption, but we should have that up within probably the next week or two, and we will send that link to all registrants. Other questions? Give it just another minute. If we don't have any other questions come through, we can let people go a little bit early, but I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask any questions they may have. I know that was a lot of information that we shared today. We'll make the slide deck available as well. And, again, if you have any other questions or, would like to follow up on anything you heard today, please do feel free to reach out to us directly. We can get you in touch with Sammy and Lindsay directly to answer any of those and to help with any resources that we can.
Kirsten, this is Betsy. We've had someone ask what instruments you're using to track school climate data.
Sammy or Lindsay, do you know of any instruments that are being used specifically within the region to track school climate data?
I believe that Hawaii, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're thinking about, they use Panorama. And so Panorama is Panorama is a survey that they've contracted with to do help track student experiences. That's been using a little bit for school climate and a little bit for understanding how students feel in their environment. They used to use Tripod, which is another school climate instrument. I know of other states that use Youth Truth, which is a survey company as well. All these are survey companies. I know of other states who have developed their own school climate surveys. And so a state like Minnesota has a statewide school climate survey that they've validated and made reliable. And that survey is actually publicly available on their website.
Yeah, here in Hawaii, all schools send out a climate survey. It's obviously, you can't mandate it, but it is sent to students and parents. I think students take it during the school day, and then parents are given it through mail. So obviously, it is Panorama. Their first pilot was actually last year, and they're on, I think, the next 2-year contract. And the cool thing about Panorama actually is that they have embedded more clear questions that actually track social emotional learning.
That's a great question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sammy and Lindsay. We have another question about specific recommendations about how to integrate SEL into instruction. I know that's kind of a big topic that we didn't have time to really touch on in great detail today. I don't know, Sammy, if you want to you give a quick overview about that. Also, David, that was a question from David, and we can certainly follow up with you after the webinar with some additional resources as well.
That is an excellent question. And so thank you, David. So when we think about academic integration, it really is it's not a newer part of SEL, but it's a part that doesn't have as many resources out there associated with it. We see a lot of resources around explicit instruction, creating those lessons, but actually integrating SEL into the lessons that you're doing, the English lessons, we don't see as many resources out there on that. And so that's something that as a REL, we're looking for those resources and trying to find ways in which we can support Hawaii in doing academic integration. And so I don't have a 100% answer for you right now, but as we collect those resources, we're hoping to make them a little bit more, we're hoping to have them all in one spot so it's easily shared for Hawaii, and I'm sure that could be shared outside as well. When we think about academic integration though, it really is, an important part of it is professional development for teachers, understanding social emotional learning. We oftentimes focus on teaching teachers how to do social emotional learning. How do teachers give the lessons? How do they support students in developing their social emotional learning skills? But we don't actually give teachers support in developing their own social emotional learning, and that makes the academic integration piece a little bit more challenging as they are creating lessons around social emotional learning within their academic curriculum that they're creating, but haven't been given the professional development to develop those skills themselves. And so we like to oftentimes encourage schools to develop teachers' social emotional learning skills alongside students.
No, I totally did all that.
Excellent.
So that actually leads into a question from Brandy about finding more information about counselor and school professional development courses to plan for adult professional development for SEL. And I know that's again, probably a pretty big question and a broad topic. But Sammy, or Lindsay, would you like to speak to that a bit? And then we can certainly, Brandy, see what we can do to help with some follow-up resources as well.
Yeah, so one of the first thing, at least because we're kind of customizing what we're saying, how to embed social emotional learning within college and career readiness, that is our work that we're doing now. But I can speak on behalf of how we're pulling certain things that already exist. So in Hawaii, we do use the ASCA model. You know, we have a lot of complex areas that have basically adopted ASCA as their framework. And if you're not familiar with ASCA, it's the American School Counseling Association. And within this is where school counselors tend to be members of. And they themselves have an entire large framework. They have everything possible to be able to be the best school counselor possible in a K-12 world. And ASCA in itself actually has PD around social emotional learning, because the 3 focus areas within counseling is that holistic. So it's academics, college and career, as well as social, personal development. So they have, I mean, I'm sure you can Google it. There's actually quite a bit of online courses available for that. But I would love, I'll connect with you definitely, Brandy, if I get your email, because the learnings that we're actually gonna be getting from Shannon Cox, I've had multiple conversations before her upcoming visit, but she herself has an entire team developing professional development for social emotional learning with her policy work of getting it within the K-12 schools. So I'll be definitely learning more from her, and she was willing to share all her resources. So I'm like, please tell me. Okay, thank you, Brandy. I will definitely grab your email. I'll definitely share more information.
Thanks so much for that, Lindsay. And we'll go ahead and pull that and make sure that you get that so you can follow up directly with Brandy. Any other questions? We are 4 minutes out from time. There is one question about resources that, to what extent students are provided with resources after they have made the transition to college, and whether or not that finishes at a certain time point.
It's a great question. Is this specifically at a different grade level? Or are we talking about seniors exiting out once they get to college? So it's funny you say that, because in Hawaii we have, and I'm sure many states have this as well, is every graduate needs to have a personal transition plan. So what we call is PTP. So again, once you graduate from high school, they need to have it. So schools have the flexibility and autonomy to make their PTP the way they want it. So it could be like mock interviews, it could be building a resume, applying for college, or so forth. But we're in the talks of how do you continue that into post-secondary? So we're actually working with our UH campuses to develop a way to track what they already created at the high school to be transferred into our UH system. Because it's already been built from 9th, ideally starting from 9th through 12th, that they have this repository of all this work, and how do you bridge it as a personal transition plan to a career plan into college. We're not there yet at all. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you, but that's how we're approaching kind of that overall plan and resources that get tied into it, because we do talk about college, career, and then the community needs that they need in order to be successful for their next steps, whether it be in college or they're just directly going to go to the workforce or military.
Okay, thank you for that, Lindsay. I appreciate that answer. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through, and we are just 2 minutes out from our scheduled end time. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone again for joining us today, and especially to thank Sammy and Lindsay for all of the great information. Again, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us through the registration and reminder emails that you received to join us here today, and we would be happy to connect you directly with either Sammy or Lindsay, and to help with any additional resources that we can. Again, we'd like to also ask you, if you don't mind, if you could just take that quick survey for us. I'm pushing that link out one more time. That does help us again, plan for future events, and it's also part of our reporting requirements. So, you know, any information and any feedback that you can offer us, we would definitely welcome. And thank you again for attending this REL Pacific webinar.